My character addresses the HIV element in a very subtle way because there's never really an acknowledgement about what happens after his assaults. And it is presented in a more strong way through my partner in the movie, or my love interest, and his journey. And I hope that's not giving too much away. But I think what's interesting about the movie is you see two very different realities of this. You see one person who is speaking about it, I wouldn't say casually, but one person who's speaking about it in a very nuanced, subtle way, and you have someone who's speaking about it very directly.
I'm really excited today to be chatting with Mark Clennon about I Don't Know Who You Are. Mark, thank you for taking the time with me about it because you do an incredible job at this film. You really do.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I mean that honestly. It's an incredibly intense role. What attracted you to the role of Benjamin?
There's so many things. I feel very lucky to have had this role because this is definitely an actor's dream in the sense that you have so many emotions. You're really being pushed. You're really being challenged. I was on screen for almost every second of the movie, and actors don't often have that because not often do you have a script that's this complex and this intense. So I knew it was going to be a challenge, and I was definitely intimidated by many parts of the project, but definitely excited at the same time.
Well, like you said, there's so many emotions in this, and it's got to be hard to be that guy because the film really rides on your back the entire time. It's just every scene you're in. How do you prepare for a role like this?
A lot of a lot of great conversations have helped me to prepare, talking to various people, talking to people who have had a lot of insight into some of the issues we address in the film really helped. Speaking of my family, my mom was very helpful. I talked to my mom about some of the things I had anxiety about and some of the things I was nervous about, and she was like, you're an actor, and this is what actors do, and just go for it. So that was very helpful. But I think the main preparation was just the research and learning as much as I could and speaking to as many people as I could about some of the really complex issues, and just understanding the ways in which my character had the responsibility to talk about the issues and tell the story and do it in a way that was meaningful.
It like you said, there's a lot going on here in this with this character. There's just a lot of the film we're following you and we just feel you in the moment. And one of the things, the one of the lines I absolutely love in the film is near the end, and I know it's not you, it's with your partner. It says, "All it took was minutes of my life, and it changed forever." But that seems like a theme of this particular film, especially dealing with as your character's dealing with trauma. Um, I was wondering in your mind, like, what in your mind, what does it take to recover from those few minutes from that trauma?
Takes a lot of support and that takes a lot of help. I definitely see through the experience of the movie how important it is to have people around you to help support you. And sometimes when we are going through a trauma, especially a trauma of this kind, where there's a lot of complicated feelings that you feel, oh, whether it's guilt or whether it's
Yeah.
self, doubt, I think the instinct is to go within and be quiet and just keep to yourself. But definitely relying on the people around you, talking through it, just letting it out, expressing it, and telling people about it can be incredibly helpful just so you can feel supported. And also, you might be able to get some insight from the people around you who, you know, can speak to that experience. Also, just realizing that, this is when you are when you're the victim of a traumatic event, realizing that this is something serious and I deserve to take time. And I think we have this instinct of just get over it, move on, don't let it get to you. I do that sometimes where something will happen and I'm like, don't be a baby, just move on, figure it out. And I mean, that's obviously helpful in times, but there are also times when you need to just stop and acknowledge the magnitude of the experience and just say, you know what, I just need a break for today. And I think that's a healthy thing to do.
And yeah, like as your character, as you're wrestling with this, you can see that you're battling with this. You struggle to speak, but needs to at the same time, trying to take moments, but understanding you're under the pressure of a clock. Like there's a lot of complexity going on in this these moments throughout this film.
Absolutely.
Um, one of the things I think is so wonderful about this film is its conversation around HIV, because this is an incredibly intense story, and your character journey, wrestling with the potential of this. I was wondering, in your experience in the conversations you've had, do you feel like the conversations surrounding HIV have changed over the years?
It's changed, and in many ways, it's become a very it's gotten it's changed in the sense that when I was growing up, I grew up in Jamaica, and I grew up, I'm not 19, and I grew up in a time where there was a lot of trauma around HIV and a lot of fear and terror, and it was this thing that ravished the LGBT community all over the world. But in Jamaica, we were dealing with a lot of the things that America was dealing with in the 80s. We were dealing with that in the 2000s when I was really young. And so it was interesting to grow up in that time and see a lot of the stress and fear and anxiety that would manifest in people, both gay and straight. And it's interesting to see now, with a lot of the advancements that we've had and a lot of the resources that are available, how that conversation has changed, and how there's still a legitimate concern about HIV, but it's not a paranoia, and it's not at the same level that it is. However, I feel this movie addresses HIV in a very subtle way. There's never really, sorry, my character addresses the HIV element in a very subtle way, because there's never really an acknowledgement about what happens after his assaults. And it is presented in a more strong way through my partner in the movie, or my love interest, and his journey. And I hope that's not giving too much away. But I think what's interesting about the movie is you see two very different realities of this. You see one person who is speaking about it, I wouldn't say casually, but one person who's speaking about it in a very nuanced, subtle way, and you have someone who's speaking about it very directly. And I think that that reflects the greater LGBT community, because this is something that means something very different to a lot of people. There are people who are older, who lived through a very traumatic time in LGBT history, and the people who are younger, who are so disconnected from that reality. And I don't think that I think it's great that there are young people today who don't have a deeper, nuanced understanding. I shouldn't say I think it's great, but I think it's, I envy that, that is the reality of the world that they grew up in. But the truth is that there's a wide variety of experiences in the LGBT community, and a lot of it is affected by your age, by whether you're from a developed nation like Canada or you're from Jamaica. It's also socioeconomic, like in a country like Canada, which is fairly privileged, there are wealthier people who have very different experiences on a wide variety of health related issues, from someone who is poor and working class. So I think, the truth of the issue, I know it's a very long answer, but there's no singular way to address HIV in 2024, because there's so many factors that affect how every person experiences it.
Well, and in this film too, there's talking about the financial factors as well. Where you're trying to pick up your meds, and without insurance, they're nearly, like I think at one point you say as much as your rent. And it's this there. This feels like the type of film I forgive me how this may or may not sound, but it feels like I called this a "This Is How It Is" movie, because this is one of those movies where stories where the character is just going through things and is stuck in the reality of his moment, and there's so many other factors. It's not a movie about HIV, but it is. It's not a movie about trauma, but it is. It's not a movie about financial struggles, but it is.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's all mixed together in this beautiful, beautiful, difficult thing to see, and absolutely. Um,
I agree.
you know, um, One of the things that we talked a little bit about HIV here, and I actually love your answer there, because you're talking about how it doesn't. There are so many different. Basically the situation you're in depends on how you're going to address it. I suppose is the reality of it, but on the larger whole, on the larger conversation, do you feel like there's still sort of a stigma attached to it? And I don't mean that to sound callous, but I mean, like just HIV in and of itself, I feel like we've progressed as a culture to feel to have better conversations about it than we did, back in the 90s and early 2000s. But um, do you feel like in the larger community, it feels like a safer thing to discuss nowadays?
I think the sad reality is that our experience as gay men is forever tied to the trauma of the HIV and AIDS crisis in the 80s and 90s. And unfortunately, many of us, whether we're young or old, whether we're rich or poor, live in the legacy of that. And there's just a lot of tenderness that comes along with that experience. And there are a lot of people who have very strong feelings and very strong ideas about HIV because, like I said, as gay men, we have unfortunately had this very traumatic experience that is just sort of intertwined with our experience as gay men. So I think that's something that really is unfortunately unavoidable. And I think it's something that is just a part of the experience. That being said, I think that, there is a lot of progress that has happened and a lot of conversations that have happened, a lot of education that has happened too. I think that there was a time in the world where people thought of HIV in a very specific way. Whereas now I think people are coming to understand of all the treatments available, of all of the, resources available to decrease viral load, and, whether it's medications like PrEP or PEP that are able to intervene either in a crisis or something that can be taken preemptively. So I think a lot of people, both, obviously gay people, but a lot of straight people as well are now more informed about HIV in a more complex and nuanced way. But my belief on this matter is that I feel like until HIV is eradicated from the planet, we still have a lot of work to do and we still have a lot of conversations to have because, again, we live in a very privileged country and, God for if there is I feel like we live in a privileged country and there are a lot of resources available to help people, whereas this does not exist across the board around the world. And HIV is still ravishing many communities on the planet. And unfortunately, for someone like myself living in Canada, it might be hard to really understand the weight of that. And I think while we need to work against HIV stigma, and I think while we need to work to create healthier depictions of HIV in media, I also do think that we just can't avoid the fact that it is a real thing that historically has affected our community as LGBT people, but also currently affects marginalized people all over the world in very scary ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. Honestly, thank you for sharing and speaking so openly and honestly with me. I really appreciate it. The film is great. What do you hope people take away from I Don't Know Who You Are?
So many things. I I just hope that it's a meaningful film for people. I hope that it helps people see and see I hope that it just helps people to see a person going through something really traumatic and someone fighting, someone persevering, someone being brave, someone surviving. And I hope that that can be inspiring on a general sense, but I hope in a more on a smaller level, I hope that it is able to give information and empower people to make um I hope that it empowers people when they're making decisions about treatment and healthcare and things like that, that they now have resources. Because a lot of the feedback that I've gotten after the film premiered is, oh my God, I didn't know this, or I didn't know that if this happened, I could do that. And our hope is that if it's one person, that there's one person that is now more informed.
I appreciate that so much. Mark, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it. Have a
Thank you so
great
much for
day.
having me. It's been really fun, and yeah, thank you for having me.
Anytime. Anytime. Let's talk again soon. Hopefully we will.
Definitely.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Thanks so
Okay,
much.
thank you. Bye.